Hello and welcome to the Swan Song Project Podcast. My name is Ben Buddy Slack and I'm the founder of the Swan Song Project and the host of this podcast. The Swan Song Project is a charity. We're based here in Leeds, England, and we help people who are facing the end of their lives or dealing with a bereavement to write and record an original song. We believe in celebrating lives, making memories and leaving legacies. If you'd like to find out more about the charity, you can visit our website, which is swansongproject.co.uk. The podcast features songwriters. Every episode I have a different songwriter on. I ask them to share with us one of their songs. We talk about how they wrote it. I ask them to share a songwriting tip, and I also ask them to share a song that's meaningful to them in some way related to bereavement. This episode features Stoney, who is an amazing songwriter in his own right, and he's also one of the team here at the Swan Song Project, who's doing some great work with us over the last year or so. It's a great conversation. I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you do, please consider liking and sharing and subscribing to the podcast. We've got a lot of great episodes coming up that you're not going to want to miss. But here it is. This is Stoney on the Swan Song Project Podcast. Enjoy. Okay, today I'm here with Stoney. Thanks for joining me, Mark.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Yeah, we look forward to this one. So, Mark is a fantastic songwriter in his own right, but he's also one of the songwriting team here at the Swan Song Project. So he's been doing a lot of songs with us over the last year or so now. So some of that might come into the conversation today, but we're primarily here to talk about Mark's own songwriting. This is Swan Song Project Podcast for anyone who's new to the podcast. I have a different songwriter on every episode. We'll go through three sections. So first we're going to have one of Mark's songs, and we'll talk a bit about how he wrote it. Then section 2, we'll ask Mark for a songwriting tip. And in section 3, I'm going to ask Mark for a song that's meaningful to him in some way related to bereavement. So for section 1, Mark, which song of yours have you chosen to talk to us about today?
So I've chosen a song called Swarm.
Slip the skin, be reborn and begin again. Shift the shape and reform from within. And then pull me present to fall together. Sent to evolve with souls of a feather. And rush of the blood in the life force. Drum up the winds of the storm. A hum at the heart of the hive of particles starting to form into a swarm. Into a swarm. Chaos to cadence who followed the exodus. Sent the messenger into the element. To the zenith, then up to the heavens. Gathered together to scatter. I am a cell in the life. In the winds of the storm, a hum at the heart of the hive, particles starting to form into a swarm, into a rising serpentine onto the charmer.
Sound frequency summoning, sound the drums woke suddenly. Stood steadily ready to follow the core, boost of energy, use the melody, move the energy on, truth propelling it, telling it intelligent till we're all one. Born again benevolent, God particle element. Live, love, lost and bury them, death bear them across. Lost many men, women, children, remember them rebelling for a cause. Trying to better every step of the very steps that we take. Better step to the pace, ever ready for whatever destiny waits. When you're ready, better bring your best to the plate. No regrets, progress is a test, make the best of your days. Focus, let's keep hope as a test in our faith. No rest in this race, know this. Move forward, justice for all, so false, cathartic, resolve it, reform quick. All evolve, many farmers, one is what the swarm is.
Okay, brilliant. So that was Swarm by Mark Stoney. Before we get on to the actual song, the video for it's amazing. Really powerful video.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's part of the reason I think I wanted to choose this one, because it was from start to finish a very collaborative project that involved all sorts of art forms. It didn't start out with that intention, but it evolved into that over the course of a long time. So that's why I chose this song. It's probably not like the most commercially cut and dry bang. That was a huge success one, but as a piece of art and as a process, I think to me it was the most interesting and unexpected one that I've done so far. So what would you like to know?
Well, let's start with that then, shall we? So how was it? What was the collaboration like? Yeah, who else was involved, and how was that different from the way you normally work?
So first off, the process of the initial seed of the song starting and for it being released, I think it was released in April 2021, so still in the middle of kind of the COVID stuff, but the initial seed was 2016, April 2016. So almost 5 years from inception to completion. It's a long pregnancy. And the song actually, the other thing about it is the song kind of evolved and passed hands kind of all over the world. So it started in Nantucket, which is a little island in Cape Cod off the northeast coast of America. And the reason it started there was I was invited on what was called a Songwriters colony in 2016. And this was the first one run by, it was founded by a guy called John Johnson of the Johnson family. And they, and he's co-founder of BuzzFeed, and a very good friend of mine, Nancy Walker, who's a legendary A&R executive from Los Angeles. And they wanted to curate this songwriting camp. They called it a songwriting colony, where they basically selected kind of 5 or 6 random songwriters, producers, and put them in a beautiful house in this desolate island, which is and went, let's see what happens. And I thought, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I'm up for that. So I went along for this, and it was the artists were put together by Nancy Walker's her name, and so she's got a real ear for sort of pulling together people who could work together and throwing them in a pot. So it was me, and it was Jade Castrinos, who is the singer of Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, did the Home, Take Me Home. A guy called Walt Vincent, who produced for Pete Yorn and Sinead O'Connor, among others, an excellent songwriter and musician. Australian dude called Lord Fascinator, who is an entity on his own, and a big Danish Viking called Rasmus Billy Bonk, who was like more into kind of dance stuff, and they threw us all into having like never met, threw us all into this place, and there was no schedule or regimen really. The idea was just to see what evolved. So I was very fortunate to be there. It was awesome. And we were all at different stages of transition. I think Jade had just come out of this huge band who had some massive hits and was like discovering her next. And I think all of us were kind of in that sort of similar position. I was sort of at a time where I was coming through starting a journey of recovery on my own from like burnout and various issues that I'd accumulated in my world of rock and roll up to that point. And then so there was no set collaborations or anything like that. You could shut yourself in your room for ages, or you could talk to each other, you could just wander around. It wasn't dependent on productivity. So it took off this huge sort of pressure that we'd all felt from our sort of careers, I think, up to that point, and just reconnected on a deep level. So that was the idea of the colony. During the course of that, about 3 weeks in, I wrote a whole batch of new stuff and reconnected, and it was kind of cinematic. I found that like being in a different place affected my output, what came out. But the guy Walt Vincent, he had shut himself in a chicken coop somewhere on this property, and he was just playing piano, and he had basically what starts off at the beginning of that da, 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 almost this Bach-like piano. And I was sort of hovering by the door, and I sort of came in, and I was like, that's really beautiful. And we sat down and we developed it. So the start of it came from just like this little melody that caught my ear. And we sketched it down and recorded something, and we just the piano part, and then I sat with it. And my process usually starts always like that. It's melody led rather than I very rarely sort of like write lyrics and then try and apply melody to it. It's usually a melody will fall out of me or will call to me in response to hearing something. So I basically just started doing some sort of stream of consciousness lyrics over things, and just noises really, and over this Bach piano and stuff like that. And certain words would start to emerge, and I sat with it, just riffing on it, and put it sort of in the pile. So we left Nantucket with it started, but not anywhere near finished. I had like some sketches. So I tend to, in my songwriting process, it's not quick for me. I'm not a quick writer. So I'll sit with it for a long time, and it's like something will emerge through, just singing stream of consciousness stuff, and might be a little word, a little thread. But this one, I had a few things, a few like little words, like essence was in there, and swarm was kind of in there, but I didn't really have a strong theme. I just had sketches. And I ended up going back to Los Angeles in 2016. This is where Walt, the guy who started the piano riff, was from, and he lived there, and he lived in a sort of a high rise in downtown LA that looked out over stuff. And it happened to be November 2016, and Trump had just been elected, and I'd gone from Texas to California, and Texas obviously quite Republican and then Democrat, so like the moods were very different in the two places. And the idea was I wanted to develop this song a bit more. I'd presented some ideas, but it hadn't really fully formulated yet. So I went to Walt's place, and it just so happened to be a night there was a massive protest going on in LA, and I stood on like the balcony, and I could see all these people like kind of just come. I don't think it was an organized protest, but it was almost like a collective call, and like seeing these swarms just sort of collectively come together. And I was sort of looking at them from like a bird's eye view almost. And I was like, wow, it looked like a swarm of insects or animal. It looked like nature, you know, kind of streaming in throughout these floods. And it was like, ching! And so like, while I was watching this, there was a da, 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 da. So it sort of it got me like kind of inspired, like who put this together? Who put out a call, or is this something that everyone's just kind of got an instinct to do, come out in response to something? And they were kind of all moving as one, you know, from like, I didn't have my glasses on, so it was like blurred. You can see like this one body of bodies basically. And at the same time, I was things had caught my eye, like murmurations in nature, you know, starling murmurations, where you see them all move as one thing, and swarms of bees and stuff like this, and not just the collective. Sorry, this is a very long-winded answer, isn't it?
No, that's good. That's very interesting.
I don't know if you speed it up afterwards. I'll just drink more caffeine. But so like it's, for example, in a swarm of bees, I've got studying that of like how do they all know to go at once? You know, how do they all do that? And not only that, but there's each one like adds a voice to it. Like each when you hear the electric buzz of a swarm of bees, it's made up of all the individual things. So each one has its own individual resonance, and then there's a collective resonance, and they all move as one. And so that was all that was going on in my head at the time. And so I was sort of inspired by watching the way that humans can, you know, collectively rise up against whatever injustice it is, or any kind of change that needs to happen in our society. And in the same way that nature kind of comes together and moves to evolve. If it's a swarm of bees, it's moving to the next. And what is the one hum that calls it all together? So that was sort of what was emerging. I didn't think, there's the idea, I'm going to write about that. That was almost emerging with the words that were sort of coming out. So it's more that when it came sort of as a whole piece together, I was like, oh, could be about that. You know, you're sort of pulling in from all this imagery you're seeing from nature and doing your best to sort of describe it in words, and then looking at the whole and going, oh, that's what it was. So I'd written this song and again, my process isn't fast. I actually, prior to this podcast, I went back and found my lyric book for Swarm. And what I used to do was, because I can go on tweaking stuff forever, trying different combinations of words. There's a lot of words in this song, and there's lots of internal rhymes. So what I was doing at the time was I used to get these project books with the dividers, and Swarm, I'd give myself between like two sets of dividers to come up with like the final draft. So trying to give it some boundary. So I did, and there was like I think on this one I was writing loads and loads, and just slight variations. Yeah, this is Swarm. Oh no, that's changed course. This is Swarm. These are like all the different versions of them there. And as you can see, it's not neat or legible. So, so it was just version after version after version, draft, tweaks, little tweaks, until it felt right. And it never feels completely right, but it gets a little bit closer. And then, so I got to this point, and I thought, okay, there's saying like good art isn't, well, art is never finished, it's only ever abandoned. At what point do you go, I'm not tweaking this anymore and I'm just going to let it go? It's been like, 3 years already or whatever. So I went to and I produce while I write as well. So I'm playing the parts, and then I'm like, I can't play piano well enough, and the sound of the piano isn't quite right. I think I went through 5 different pianos with 5 different pianists. Like my cousin Jacob, who plays for Billy Bragg, he came and played it. There was Emily Gimbel in Texas. She played a version. I played a version, and my friend Greg played a version on 5 different pianos. Are like Bosendorfers, my one here, like a MIDI keyboard. So, I mean, I know that's dysfunctional and expensive, but that was, and it's not the process I use in the Swan Song, right? You'll be glad to know. But it's that's where I was sort of evolving through it, and in a way, like this with this song, I evolved through it quite a lot, and then I went to Texas to. I was working with a producer called Danny Reich. Brilliant producer, mixer, engineer. And when I've got all these ideas, I basically sort of dropped them on his desk and said, so I've got 7 piano takes, 7 different ones. Do you want to choose one? And so he would patiently go through all the things and sort of make the decisions that I haven't yet made. And usually I think it ended up being a combination of everyone who'd played just on this thing. So he sent that back and he said, it's done. So I took it home thinking, it just doesn't quite feel done. There's this big section in the middle that just feels like it needs something.
And was that the track with the piano and the lyrics as well? Was it that the fully produced track?
So this was a fully produced track at this point. We've mixed it, but it had this instrumental. And so it doesn't feel quite done. And I started working with this local MC rapper, brilliant guy called Franz Vom. I was helping him produce some of his stuff, and we were really enjoying collaborating together. And I just kept hearing him on my Swarm track, but it was a 3-4 buck piece. You know, it's not your typical hip hop thing. And I was like, Franz, have you ever rapped in 3/4, by the way? Like, yeah. He's like, I'll give it a go. And so I'd sent him a brief of like what I'd put together so far. There'd been, you know, the call of rising up and stuff like that. And within 24 hours, he came back like with this section. So up to that point, I'd done 3 years to get my part done. And over to Franz within like the next day, he was like, yeah, I've got it. I'm ready to go. It was like, oh my word. And what I read like gave, you know, sort of put shivers down my spine. It was terrific.
He sent you it written then? He sent you the lyrics for it rather than like a voice note of him rapping it?
Yeah, it was just like I think he said, I'm trying to remember now, but I think it was and this was in at the end of 2019, I think. So it's already gone on for 3 years at that point. But he'd I was looking back on my WhatsApp to check my facts, and there was just like this thing that had just come out, and it was like, wow, that's incredible. And I think he came round the next day and he was like, well, you know, it's kind of more spoken word than like rap because of it's the 3/4, and so we put it down anyway, and I loved it. I loved the what he came up to in response to to what I'd done. And that's the beautiful thing about art, when you sort of release it and hand it over, that someone else can have a different response to that. And so I really like what he did. And so I called Danny back up and I said, so I've added this, but he's like, you've done what? I was like, can you just like see if, and he was like, I don't know if I could do it, but you know, he obliged, and he did like we kind of worked Franz's version in. So, and we actually had one of each by that stage, like the original one and then the one with Franz.
So is the original one the same length, just without the rap, or is the instrumental section shorter?
We changed the structure slightly to accommodate it, because Franz had more to say than I expected. So I think I lengthened it a bit and changed its placement. But more or less there was this gap for it, and Franz had worked his his section into that. So like, it's, when you look at the lyric sheet with Franz's rap and my already quite wordy lyrics, it's like a scroll. It just goes on and on and on. It's like, I think it's around 4 minutes, the song. But then again, we started to shoot a video for it, and then just to and I think really the visual is as much part of the song in a way as that, like it's a whole piece. So it was we were thinking, how can we put some visuals to this? We had the track by this stage, and we were looking on Instagram, and there was this young lad called Oscar who we found, who'd been sort of shooting really cool little few second long videos of the dancers in the video. Max, who's I think he was like young dancer of the year or something in on the BBC in like 2009. Absolutely phenomenally talented bloke, and got in touch with him and said, would you be up for like working with us on like a music video? Here's the song. And both he and Max were up for it. So we started shooting at the beginning of lockdown. Not at the beginning of lockdown, just before. We started shooting in February 2020, and we'd sort of drawn out this idea for it that involved, you know, a storyboard and involved all these things, and it was completely like the plug had to get pulled because we were all completely shut down and couldn't be in the same place anymore. So we had like what we had initially planned to do had lots of sort of gaps in it, and we'd started this idea but hadn't finished it. And Oscar, the guy who recorded some of the stuff, was it kind of disappeared. We weren't sure where he'd gone, and you know, everyone was in a bit of a state of chaos. So it hung suspended for a while, you know, the visual of it. And so I started thinking of a plan B, and I looked up like murmuration videos and stuff like this, and there was this this piece about murmurations by I think he's Norwegian, this guy Jan Van, his name's Jan, and he's done this amazing video called about murmurations, and exactly the thing that the song was about. He'd shot starling murmurations, I think, in Norway, and he's also done amazing things on like plankton and like all on like a micro level as well as a bigger level, and studying nature. And I saw some of his work, and I got in touch with him, and I said, I played Swarm over this murmuration thing that he had shot, and it just looked perfect. It was like the birds were moving with the music. I was like, oh, this is great. I'm just gonna have this as a video. And so I emailed him, and he very kindly said that, you know, we could use it. And that took it in a new direction. And then when we were able to start meeting up again, Max was able to he kind of had some pieces anyway, which were him sort of moving as if he was one micro part of this macro that was going on at the time. We were all sort of held in this suspension during that period, and you felt like things were changing with, you know, humanity was sort of moving as one in response to what was going on. And he kind of did just incredible stuff to do with that. And Franz went down we found Oscar in London, and Franz went down, and you know, they shot that amazing thing together, where his section, and then we kind of pieced it all together, set a deadline. I ended up sort of editing the thing together and learning how to do that. And it was such, by the end of the whole process with the video in place and the song, kind of got it out past the finish line, but it had been a 5-year process.
Wow.
That had started with this tiny little tinkle in Nantucket, gone like down to Texas, back to Sheffield, up to Norway, back to Texas again, and then sort of ended with me in my dressing gown at 3 a.m, like having not slept for 4 days and eyes like this going, how do I publish to YouTube? There it was, and it was out, and it was
Wow.
it was the first thing I'd released in 7 years in like a very changed climate of the music industry, where it was like records and I had labels and producer, and this time I was completely out of my depth. I was like, I don't know how to release something in this. So it was like I put together this video with the help of all these people, sort of, although I'd kind of curated all the different elements of it, it was a real collaborative effort. I mean, you know, there were kind of 3 of us writing it, the visual artists, M doing a lot of visual stuff, and someone in Texas helping edit the video. So the whole, it was the cast list was long, and it was all quite low budget on a shoestring and sort of putting bits to it when we could, but that was basically the accumulation of that. And then you put it out on Spotify, and Spotify's trying to put it into an algorithm. They're like, is it classical? Is it rap? we don't know. So it's like, but it exists out there, and it was a triumph of kind of everyone coming together. And so I think as an art piece, I'm quite proud of it, and proud to be a participant in it, rather than, you know, this was me. This was kind of a real collaboration. So there's a very long-winded answer of Swarm.
Good, very, very detailed, and very interesting story. It's how, like, so that's 5 years that took to come together. Did you, I guess, how does that feel when you're working on that? And so, like, were there points where you were just like, oh, I just want to get this done now and get it out and move on to something else? And were you working on other things through that process? Like, did you have other songs on the go?
Yeah. So that is, it's not like one that is
like every day
my
you're getting up at 9 to 5 working
purpose.
on this one.
It can be for a week. I mean, like, I did work kind of almost obsessively on this one, and I think there's a couple of holding space for that. I think, without wanting to be too mystical about it, kind of songs have some you kind of are a puzzle that you're meant to unravel, for me anyway, and that can take a long time. I remember reading, almost feeling like, after maybe like the 4-year point of this still not being done, and the people around me as well, who are having to listen on repeat through the walls, you know, it's a form of it drives you to a certain form of insanity. But it was like I was listening to it again and again and writing a new draft and refining it each time, and then going back to the original. And I don't know why that was the process with it, but that I read I think quite famously there was a conversation between Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan, where because Hallelujah took Leonard Cohen 7 years to write, I think it was, and Bob Dylan, they used to just fall out of him like within 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And there was a conversation between the two of them where I think Bob Dylan asked him, how long did it take you to write Hallelujah? And he lied. Leonard lied and said, like, it was 2 years. 2 years. Actually, it had taken him 7. But and I think Leonard asked him, like, how long did it take to write? Was it I and I think the track was one of his favorites. And he said, 15 minutes, which was the truth.
Yeah.
And so they had, like, but Leonard Cohen had written, I think, 80 drafts of that song. And it was just, I wish I was more like, I had Bob Dylan's thing, because it's like, it frees you up for other things, you know. But sometimes there's certain songs that you wrestle with. And I think through the course of this song, regardless of whether it's any good or not, I kind of evolved. I learned to play piano a lot better. I learned to collaborate, look at things visually. I kind of grew with the song as I wrestled it. So as part of like my process in and out was like reflected through the birthing of this song. But it wasn't the only thing I was doing for 5 years.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I do tend to have like a batch of, in that Nantucket section, I think I came out with 10 songs. The soundscape comes out very, very quickly. And then the fine crafting and the tuning and the tweaks can go on for years, but there's usually 10 of them doing that at the same time.
Yeah.
And then you go in and doing other things like putting the bin out or, doing whatever it is, working on other people's projects. So that's, that, if that answers your question, it wasn't the only thing I was doing, but it was a long process.
Yeah.
That was always in the background until it had finished.
Yeah. Funny, that same Leonard Cohen Bob Dylan story came up in the last episode I recorded.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah, that same story.
I should have watched it all the way through.
But yeah, no, it's a good point, and it is just how different people are, different people work. So when you're, and I guess there's a few questions I'm thinking of here. How do you know? What's your feeling like? So with like, is it just natural, like you're kind of drawn towards like a particular song, which just keeps drawing you back to it and keeps making you feel it's not quite right? And so is there other ones that you start and then you do just leave behind and decide like that's not going anywhere? And there's ones that you keep being drawn back to. Is it a natural thing, or is there any kind of selection process you have there?
That's a good question. So I think on my hard drive at the moment, I've usually always got about an amount of starting ideas that I could never finish. Like I think there's about 60 or 70, and they usually stay that way for quite a long time because I'm really good at starting things, and I'm always thinking this is the best song. The song that you're currently working on is usually the best thing that you've ever written. That's what you feel like, this is going to be quick. This is going so well, and you're in flow. But usually I have to like step away from it. I come back, and I think there's usually, there's something that stays with you, like a certain thing of like, because I can start ideas and I think, oh, that's pretty cool. I'll see if anything comes. And some just, drawn back to it is a good way of putting it. It's like, oh, I want to hear that again. I want to live with it for a bit, and that melody kind of goes around your head, and so. And
does that stop when it's finished then? Like, when you put Swarm out, does it stop? Like, it almost feels like you're kind of haunted by something, and like kind of haunted by an idea that then you need to kind of.
It can be quite haunted, and it's an interesting question. I don't know if I'm a good judge of it because. I think there's lots of factors that particularly the older we get, we accumulate things like certain fear, and there's like, is it the fear of letting this go? Could I have released it like 2 years ago and it's in a more primary form and written a whole album? I mean, I've written basically, when you've got like however many 50 drafts of one song, I mean, you've effectively written 50 songs, 50 versions of the same song. It's like, could I have written 50 other versions? But I think in terms of but what was the question again that you just asked? Like, when
it was about
when you finished it, is it done?
Does it change that? So the feeling that draws you back to it, does that dissipate when it's complete?
I think when it's released,
when it's released.
That for me, that's the only point, because I had actually finished it in 2019, but then it was like the visual part of it took another 2 years, and then it was released. And it's quite a lot of work to release something, particularly if you're on your own and you've got to set up all these things and all these accounts and go, well, how do you make a visual for it? And particularly if you're on a budget, you're trying to make something as good as you can. It's very piecemeal. But for me, when it was released, there is a detachment for sure. It's not like it lives in me in the same level anymore. Yeah. It was I was just stating it. And then when it's out there, it's kind of, I don't need to listen to it ever again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is, and it's interesting talking about it because it's I listened to it again probably for the first time in a long time, but and trying to remember how it all came together.
Yeah.
So I think for me, at least, there's definitely a detachment when it goes out, but then you can reconnect with it. For me, I played it live when I played it live for the first time, and you have to represent it in different rooms, and then it takes on a new life. And so, well, I don't listen to the recording part of it when I go to play it live, because it's so different each time, and your relationship to the song is different. So you might have a different perspective 2 years later on the same words than you did when you released it. So you kind of re-experience it again. And I did a version with Franz in like a cafe, one of the first gigs we did when we were first allowed to. It was the first time it was performed live was a good couple of years after it was released, and it was just a very piano, me and Franz, and it just had a completely different feel to it. And I could feel it again. I could feel that same thing, but in a different way. And I think that's the interesting thing with songs, because if you're performing it again, there's definitely like a detachment. Your relationship changes to it when it's out. You're no longer you're no longer creating it, but you still have a relationship with it.
I imagine it's a bit similar to like when children are growing up. Like, you're no longer like the primary carer. It's like they're kind of out there in the world now. You just hope that you've kind of prepared them enough to do the best.
That's really true. And you can't, you really, the more you try and control it, where it goes, like the more it will rebel against you, I expect, So, that was it at that point. It's kind of, but you are reunited with it as a more mature being, and it's
and that relationship changes all the time as you
reunite. It does. And you can play around, you can change things. I definitely do listen back to it and go, that one word, I wish I'd not sung that. I've got a better one now, but the gate's closed to reopen that file and change one.
And just thinking on that, like, it's kind of interesting, some of the stuff that we talk about with Swan Song and when we're working with people, of where these kind of lines are, of where what changes are important to the song and which changes are like so you can just change things on and on, isn't it? So sometimes we have these conversations talking about when a song is complete and what are the changes that are going to impact the overall impact of the song. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, that I think we've touched on briefly before, is the primarily starting from melody rather than starting from lyrics. So I'm kind of the opposite. I've generally always been someone who started from lyrics. So we've talked briefly about it before, but I thought this might be interesting to just have a bit more of a chat about. So when do you have any kind of like stories or lyrical themes that you're interested in exploring that then materialize through your lyrics, or is it always just like you just play and then you find a bit of melody that you like, and then, like you described with Swarm, you just kind of play around with words and then a theme emerges? And then I guess I do this a lot on the podcast, where I pile up questions kind of like, and then I just hit you with about 3 or 4 at a time.
I know, I'll just write them down.
So I guess the process of when you're writing lyrics, so you've come up with a bit of melody. So first, I guess, does that melody just come, you just let that emerge naturally? So you've not got anything predetermined in your head of like, I want to write something that's dark and moody, or that's upbeat, or and then is it the stream of consciousness stuff and see what comes out and emerge from there? And then I guess another question, is that the way it continues, or once you've got the melody and some ideas, do you sit down with a notepad and start thinking about that?
So historically, for me, it has always been melody driven. So usually, say that piano riff, using Swarm as an example, and what happens next is that I will usually on a song like that, I'll have that and I'll set it up and I will record whatever comes out of my mouth. So it might not even be real words. And it's a very vulnerable moment because I'm kind of basically trying to get my brain out of the way, because I feel like the melody for me is like that very primal thing. That's something that sort of falls out from almost beyond. That's a mystery to me. I was like, oh, okay, I'm responding to this and I'm not thinking about what it could be about, but an emotion comes out. And when I think I'm allowing that, so it's I call them, a stream of consciousness, but it sounds like absolute nonsense. And it will come out, and whatever words might come out, it's the sort of thing that it's like, oh, if someone actually, you've left your window open when you're getting undressed or something, that's what it would feel like if someone overhears that bit, because it's very kind of, I could be saying, cabbage bin man, whatever might come out, but usually actually then I do that like 2 or 3 times and a melody will come out that just feels right, that just almost, it's like the frequency feels right and the emotion feels right. And then usually within that, there's a word that sounds right as well. It's just like, it's percussively right. And that's like the first thread usually. It's not always like this, but usually. So it might be, I think I said the word like essence or something. And sometimes I might not even know really what that word means. And so that's like the first part of like a thread that you sort of follow. So from like the word essence, I might look that up and go, what is essence? And then a rabbit hole sort of forms. And then like 7 years later, it's like, but usually there's something, bits come out. And I think it might be Jeff Tweedy who does that stream of consciousness thing, then literally transcribes what is heard, I think it is, heard himself say. And it's almost like you're getting out the way. And usually there's something in that unconscious. Sometimes it could be quite disturbing. Yeah. Sometimes it could be funny, but there's something that's like, it's almost like you're listening to yourself and going, what am I saying? And it can be quite revealing. And so that's usually the starting point always. And there'll be like 1 or 2 words. And then I try and form something that I sometimes try to cram a meaning into it. So it's not completely abstract. I have trouble like leaving things completely abstract. It was something I like to do more of because it would save me a lot of time to just put random words and say, it means something. But usually not to worry too much about meaning, but I want to understand at least what's coming out of me and why it came out and what it might be saying. So it's like any conversation, any body language. It's like, wow, okay, that came out. Those are weird words. Is it a deeper part of me is it an ancestor trying to talk to me? What is it? Decode it, So sometimes it is that. But, it's not actually, interestingly, you talked about, because I know a lot of people start with lyrics and then apply melody to it. The first time I've done that is in the Swan Song Project. And I had like a big, I can't do that thing when I got there. And actually, it does really work kind of in reverse. And so that's been a real stretch for me in sort of, we've with the people that I've worked with, generally we've started with a similar sort of stream of consciousness, but actually just free writing and saying, just don't think of it as poetry, don't try and write the words, just give space to write whatever comes to mind. Sometimes that can be in response to a piece of music that you've already created, but just write what emotions are coming up. And so then there's sometimes there's lyrics and I sing them as if I was reading them, but I sing them and I was like, actually, that sounds okay. And I've surprised myself in that process that is a viable option for me. So it's almost like it's added a new skill set. Really.
Oh, that's really good to hear. Yeah, I remember us talking about it when we were talking about the Swan Song kind of recruitment stuff. The idea was that we wanted to, show you some methods that have worked for me, but like not impose them either. So the idea being that if you do find a different way of doing it that works really well for you, go and do it. But the lyrics first I find it seems to work well with people who aren't musical, so aren't trained in music.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's trained in words, and everyone knows how to use words and tell stories. So it's a good way of getting people into it. But it's no, it's really interesting. One of the things that we're loving at Swan Song at the minute is having all you guys doing the work and hearing how everyone's doing things, is making it work in their own way and the different processes people use. That's all really interesting, Mike. We're going to move along a little bit, so moving to section 2 now. So this is where I always ask my guests for a songwriting tip. So what would your songwriting tip be for us today, Mark?
I would actually say, what would I say? I'd say collaboration as much as possible, just because I think that we can get sort of stuck in formulas of our own formulas. And so I think that with Swarm being so collaborative, hearing other people's response to stuff broadens your own horizons to doing things. And even if what you come out with isn't great, I feel like it always grows you in some way. That would be, it's a bit of an obvious one, I guess, but to collaborate and be open to more collective processes is a tip that I'm doing at the moment, whether it's whoever it is.
I think it's a good one, and I think what you said as well about being willing to collaborate just for the sake of the collaboration, rather than being attached to, we're going to co-write together today, and we're going to write a song that we're going to release, and we're going to put it on this, and we're going to do that. Yeah. Instead, being like, just we're going to spend a few hours together. We're going to play around with some ideas. We might get a song out of it. We might not. We might just
exactly.
And we're going to learn something about it.
Totally. And there's things like no song but a friendship, or no song but no, I don't like that person anymore. But it is about growing with the process and allowing that, not thinking, I think, because one of the things I do is write with other people through my publishers and stuff like that, and there's always an outcome. You've got a day or two to write this song, and you've got to have a product at the end of it. But when you remove that part, even if it's 2 days, and go, let's just make the art, figure out the frame, whether we want to frame it later, and it could just be that, I never learned that about Logic before, or I've never approached something like that with lyrics first or to a brief. And you learn something about yourself in the process of opening yourself up. So I think it's collaborate.
It's really good advice. A slight follow on from that, which I imagine people might want to know, is any tips about how to go about finding collaborators? So this is what I know. I've met a lot of people who kind of like either write songs themselves or play a bit of something and want to collaborate more, but don't know how to find people to do it with, and finding people that they would feel comfortable with, I guess. So would you have any advice for them? I've always been surprised with who said yes when I've just asked. I guess with the no, I mean, music's such a unifying thing, and there's usually nothing to lose about getting in the room together and just trying something. So, I mean, really, even with Franz, I nearly didn't ask him because I thought, this isn't his type of music or whatever, but I'm so glad I did. And we've collaborated on loads of stuff since. So I think the thing is, now everyone's out there and quite accessible. It's not that you need to find an agent or find who their manager is. You can, slide into their DMs and then that's what the kids say, isn't it?
Do you fancy? That's what the kids say. And you just say, would you be up for doing something? I usually, sometimes when I'm producing something and I don't know the next step, like I've got that melody, but I don't have that. Sometimes I don't hear my own voice. So I've heard, there's one that I'm doing now where there's this great, amazing Ghanaian artist called KOG in Sheffield. He's worked with Franz quite a lot, but he's just phenomenal. And I could just hear him on it. And so I just sent him a message and said, do you hear anything in response to this section of music? And he's like, well up for it. Let's get, so we're getting together next week and we're going to see what happens, you know?
Nice.
So I think always just sending out the invite. I mean, the worst that can happen is someone say no, but we usually don't. We usually say maybe, or yeah, sure, let's do that. And it never happens. So that, I think usually that's the worst thing. Find who it could be. I also think people who are in a different, do something different to you is always, you know, challenge yourself. Usually always doing something that scares me, grows me the most. And even writing like the thing that I'm most scared to say, using that as a starting point, asking the person who you'd be most intimidated to kind of work with and work with them, like which in this case is you, Ben. Would you be up for a collaboration? You know, I think it's good. It's a point to connect. It's, to me, it's like, come round and have a meal with me. You know, let's exchange what we do, and I really like that. But you do have to be comfortable with getting vulnerable very quickly, and you know, particularly when I go, I'm just going to sing some stream of consciousness, and this gobbledygook comes out of my mouth. I wrote a song with Annie Lennox once through Guy Chambers, and I never actually met her because I was working as a lyricist with Guy on a few projects, and she was working with him on a couple of things. And I was sent through the version that had her dummy stream of consciousness. I guess she does that too. So they'd come up with this melody, they'd done a stream of consciousness, then they'd sent it to me and said, could you refine? There were like a few words in there. So this really distinctive voice that, you know, we've all grown up with, Annie Lennox's amazing voice, was singing this. It was like a secret world that I've, like, you know, obviously never share that with anyone, delete it afterwards, but it's part of that primal thing. And, you know, so being able to just let whatever comes out and that be okay, and creating a space where that's not going to be judged, I think is a really important thing in collaboration. So just ask people.
Yeah, no, that's great, Mac. Really good advice, I think.
Hi, my name is Deb, and my husband Rich was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia at the age of 50. We were invited to write with the Swan Song Project about memories Rich has, and he wanted to include things in everyday life that mean a lot to him. We met Ben a few times to chat with what he wanted to put in the song and the type of music he wanted to put the words to. Music is a massive part of Richard's life. We were also invited to the recording studios, which he absolutely loved. The song is amazing. Everybody loves it. It's just Rich, and it means so much to us because due to his diagnosis, he will lose his voice eventually, but we will always have it. Please donate to the Swan Song Project to help more people like ourselves and write a song to keep forever.
But I'm a happy man. Love my life and do the best I can.
Brilliant. So let's move into section 3 now. So this is where I ask my guests to share with us a song that's meaningful to them in some way relating to bereavement. So which song have you chosen for us today, Mac?
So the song I've chosen is called Here I Am by a friend of mine called Seth Gibbs, who was a friend, bandmate, and a neighbor in when I lived in Austin, Texas. But he also toured with me here in the UK. He passed from stomach cancer in 2018 at the age of 36. So if I would compare my process to Leonard Cohen's, then his is more of a Bob Dylan. You know, he was the type where songs fell out of him. And so should I talk about him? Should I talk about the song a bit? Is that all right? Or shall we listen to it? Or
we'll listen to it first. So we'll chop it in.
Yeah.
So this is Here I Am, isn't it?
Here I Am, Seth. Yeah.
Cool.
Thought that I was gonna die when I woke up this morning, but here I am. One more day to find a way, and find a way I will, 'cause here I am. Fade to black and back again. Fight the faint today. I win. Someday I won't be here, and someday's coming fast. I always felt invincible. I wasn't built to last, but I'm your brother, and I'm your friend, and I promised you until the very end. Thought today would drift away when I passed out this morning, but here I am. One more day to find a way, and find a way I will, 'cause here I am. Fade to black and back again. Fight the faint today. I win. My body and my spirit will go in different ways. I always reconcile them, not so much these days, but I'm your brother, and I'm your friend, and I promised you until the very end. Thought I'd gone to the beyond when I could not be working, but here I am. One more day to find a way, and find a way I will, 'cause here I am. Fade to black and back again. Fight the faint today. I win. One more day to find a way, and find a way I will, 'cause here I am.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, that was Here I Am. It's a great song. It's like it walks the line so beautifully between being really like powerful and emotive and being really fun.
Yeah. It was, and to put it into context, so this is from Seth's last ever album, which he mainly wrote and recorded of like between his diagnosis and his passing, which sadly was a very short time. It was about 3 months was the window. He thought he had a lot longer. And Seth managed to pretty much write a whole album. So rather than a swan song, it was a whole album. And I mean, he was a guy who wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of songs, and I was just always amazed. And he was a multi-instrumentalist and a brilliant producer, but you know, something would happen, he'd write a song about it, and you know, do so very opposite to my process. So this particular song called Here I Am, I was in Texas at the time. Seth had just had his diagnosis, and I was doing the mix of Swarm among some other tracks with Danny. And so I was very, very fortunate that I was able to kind of spend time with Seth, and some good quality, deep time. We were very deeply connected. I loved him very much. We we shared a creative process and a kind of brotherhood, really. And he had this shocking diagnosis. The cancer had spread very quickly, and it was ravaging his body. So I went round to hear what he'd been working on, and I'd played in Swarm. I'd been like 3 years in the making so far. What do you think? What do you think it needs? And he goes, well, here's a song I just wrote. And it was, he shared how, he'd been feeling all right. And then one day he collapsed just out of the blue. And he went to like the other side, and it was like he felt his life leave him. And he kind of had to pull himself back. It was an experience that obviously I was just, would be like, wow. And he said, yeah, but I woke up again, and I thought, phew, that was close. And I got up and wrote a song about it. So he literally went from like, oh, phew, that was close, got in his studio, and then you can hear in his voice is struggling, is kind of but he was like, it's a celebration, I'm still here today. So he was, the lyrics are, I thought that I was, thought that I had died this morning, but here I am, and I'm gonna fight as long as I can. And it was like with every breath that he had, he was gonna put out music in the world. And so it's like this really kind of cheery statement of, this happened this morning, I nearly died, but here I am. And it's like a 3-minute like little song, or 2 minutes or whatever, where it's just like, it was such a lesson to me. But then the line that I remember, he didn't get to see its release. It was put together by his brother afterwards, because he didn't make it to the release. But it was that line, but I'm your brother and I'm your friend, and I promise you until the very end, that that line would like hit me in the heart when I listened to him, because he was my brother. He had the word brother tattooed across his back like this. He was a very kind of respond to the situation type, which I really want to be more like. And he's kind of, I still hear his voice. I think that veil, I think the more we kind of encounter death, I mean, for me it's the veil's quite thin. You kind of hear these, particularly the deeper you're connected to someone, the sort of more they're there. I use songwriting advice and stuff. And so he was going to be playing bass on Swarm, actually, because when I was taken to the studio, and he was like, oh, I really want to play bass on it, I can hear a bass line. He was the most amazing bass player. So he had that set up, but unfortunately the day he was going to come down, he took an unexpected decline and had to go into a hospital. So he never made it. But that was like so there's a bit of crossover between this sort of throwaway song about something really kind of, I nearly died today, there's a song, right, move on to the next one, and me with this like labored process. Sort of those two things crossing paths at the same time. But Seth's, we, when he passed, we all did covers of his songs, and there was another album out there called I think it's We Are Your I Am Your Brother, and all of us had like done a cover of his song, of one of his songs he'd wrote in 500. So look on the Bandcamp, the whole album's like, it's beautiful, it's funny. He had a very kind of gallows humor about it, but wasn't afraid to sort of acknowledge the real sad moments, and he had to feel all those emotions in a very, very short space of time. And he didn't know if he hoped he had a couple of years at least, but in the end it was very quick. So just learning that kind of being in the moment. I need a bit more of Seth in my process, sometimes, a lot of the time. So beautiful guy, and I'd encourage you to listen to at least a unique perspective on a young man.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to listening to the rest of the album. So that song was amazing. And yeah, I'll put the links in the description so anyone watching this wants to listen to the rest of it. And the Covers album sounds great as well. And yeah, what a beautiful kind of swan song really to go out and to do it in such a quick and like accessible way and fun way of like I think it's just beautiful. There's one of the lyrics I really liked in it. There was the someday I won't be here, that day is coming fast. I always felt invincible. I wasn't built to last. Yeah, and I think it's particularly like so we both worked with quite a few young people at Swan Song, and like there is that feeling where like you do feel invincible when you're a particular kind of age, don't you? And you assume like, oh, these illnesses don't happen to young people. I always remember the first person I worked with at Swan Song was a similar age to me, and I walked in and met her, and it was just like it just really hit of like, oh, this could happen to me at any point. Isn't you're not guaranteed.
I think that was it. And with Seth, that was the one that really kind of changed me, that process with Seth, because he's 2 years younger than me, but we'd been so close, and it was just, oh wow, all this, that it's good you picked out that line. That's because that's exactly, it was like a reflection back to me as well. And I think that was, I think realizing that for Seth, because when I went and saw him and we were chatting, and it was like when we were talking, he was holding my hand and he told me he loved me, and it was like he just allowed himself to have that, and it was and that wasn't something that we'd normally do, but it was really important. And you're faced with that, and you do, and I'm so glad I got the chance to do it, and it does make me realize that's what we should be doing with people the whole time, because we don't know. But the experience of that grief, that passing really changed me. I think it's still a part of me. I don't think you get over that. You integrate it into your experience, and I think Swan Songs, the people we work with teach us that, and it's humbling and it's an honor. And people who are facing that access a space that is inevitable, but we don't really engage with much until it starts happening. So yeah,
definitely. And there's something that again, I feel like it's a big privilege in Swan Song, is to witness people dealing with something so difficult, but still finding the strength and the humor and the willingness to do something new and creative. And the same what we're talking about with Seth here, about the people that we work with as well, of like, obviously it's obviously we get to witness it close up, but it's impossible to imagine what that must feel like to get such a kind of diagnosis, and then to know how you would react. And like, I hope I would react the same way, or like in some kind of similar way to some of the people we get to work with who handle it with such
it's inspiring, isn't it? It's really inspiring, and it's I learned so much from it. I think as how I'm just I hope that I have half the it's I hope I have half the courage and insight that you have, but like you say, you don't know until
that comes,
that happens. So
brilliant. So we'll close it there, Matt. But thank you very much for your time. It's been really interesting talking to you.
Thank you. Well, you haven't really talked to me. I've talked at you. Like, just
that's the way it should be. I always think a good podcast host doesn't need to say very much.
But thanks for letting me ramble.
It's been great to have you. And I'll put all the links in the description so people can check out your work and hear your other songs. And you can also hear some of the songs Matt's worked on at Swan Song on the Swan Song Project website. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'll be back with another episode soon.